Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today, this Thursday? I see we have a couple of people on. We will continue to let people in here. I see Coral is back on here. Good morning, Mike. How are you? So one of the things that I have been asked to do is open it up and just to ask how everybody did with this past week. I see that everybody's still in business, right? So we're still alive after the changes. That's a positive thing, right? And I'm so excited because Alex is on here this morning. Sorry, Alex. I have like 10 Alex in my life and I have 3 Alex. And I get in trouble all the time if I call an Alec an Alex. So I get stuck on Alex. I don't know, it's silly. Anywho, Coral is on here, and Coral specifically had a question for you. I know, and I'm just going to start it off that way because I don't know how long did I have with you on this call. But Coral said, she called me up and she was like, hey, Alex Mayer was on the call 2 weeks ago, and he said that almost every time he goes out, even in this changing market, he is winning the buyers' presentations and signing on buyers at, numbers like 3% or 3.5%. And I don't want to put the number in your mouth, Alex, because I'd rather you talk about it. And she's, like, well, how is he doing that? Because we're constantly getting, negotiated here. And she just kind of wants to hear from your perspective, how you do it differently. If you have like a few minutes to talk about it.
Yeah, so when I first got in the business, my broker, we were required to charge 3.5%, right? That was part of the brokerage thing, right? And that was the way our commission split was set up. Like you were on a 50-50 split and it dropped to a 40-60 split if you only got 3, or you had to ask for the 3.5, right? If you didn't ask and you didn't get it and you only got the 3, then you still got your 50-50, right? But because of that, we were kind of trained to handle that conversation initially. So regularly here, when we were paying out buyer broker co-ops, we would be paid out 3%, right? And we charged 3.5%. So what we would have a conversation with our buyer about was that, the seller is going to be paying the 3%. We can write it into the purchase agreement that the 0.5% is being paid by the seller. You can ask them for 0.5% in seller's contributions, and then just understand that you will be paying that 0.5% at the closing table to make up that difference. But because it's essentially a wash,
Right.
calling it something different. Or you can pay that yourself, right? Just pay cash, and that's the way it is, right? It's really, up to them. But when I kind of took that policy after that brokerage disbanded and I went to my next brokerage, and, I was like, I'll just continue charging that because people would pay it, right? It's the same thing. Like in some states, I know like a lot of people are like, I don't charge broker administration fees or anything like that. Like my first brokerage, there was also a $795 broker administration fee, and you charge that on the buy side and on the sell side, and they would just pay that at closing. So today I charge $895 a broker admin fee. But when I switched to my last brokerage, I was there for 5 years. I asked my broker, I'm like, can I decide what my buyer broker commission is? He's like, well, no one really, like, other than, 3%, which was normal over there. No one really charged more than that. And no one's really asked me to do that. I'm like, yeah, but like you'll take a listing at 7 or 6% and you won't bat an eye. Like you have to start treating your buyer appointments like a listing. And I did. I've always treated my buyers like a listing. And I feel like if you educate them up front, they really appreciate you for it. And that's why I have so many great 5-star reviews. My clients do pay me more. So when I was training my team, which I disbanded a little over a year ago, but they were with me for 3.5 years, I explained to them that the reason why I think that it helps to charge an additional 0.5% is when you pay attention. And when I talk to my clients about it, I would just explain to them that in most situations in the past, the listing broker was going to pay 2.5, 2.7, 3%, whatever it is that they're paying out, whatever it was. And you are only responsible for the 0.5% difference, right? Mm-hmm. Now, probably about, 2.5 years ago, I stopped charging the 3.5 and just started doing 3 because prices went crazy, and I was making good money, so I didn't really care. But I've always been paid 3 with one exception, and it was a situation where the listing brokerage was offering 2.7, and I did ask the buyer to pay the 0.3% difference, and then a few weeks later I forgot that they were a VA buyer, and I couldn't actually charge the buyer the 0.3% difference. So there was only one time in my career when I was representing a buyer where I was paid less than 3. It was because of a mistake I made, right? But essentially, like, even when we were seeing, I call them deficiencies in my market. When I talk to a listing broker and they were only paying out like 2 or 2.5 or 2.7, I just explained to my buyer, I'm like, you have 3 options. Number 1 is we can write in the purchase agreement stating that they're paying the difference to get us a 3 to fulfill buyer's broker's obligation. Number 2 is you can pay it yourself and just bring that money to the closing table, right? Or number 3 is we can increase the closing costs and then offset the difference later, right? So we just ask for 0.5% in closing costs, and then you're responsible for that difference at closing. Just understand that it's going to be coming out of your debits. There's a lot of different ways to work numbers, is the way that I would explain it to buyers. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Like, you are the only person bringing money to the closing table. The seller's got an asset, but you are the one bringing money to the closing table. And it drives me a little bonkers when I do talk to sellers. Like, well, I'm paying that. I'm like, I get it. You're the one divvying out the credits and the debits at closing, but you're not the one bringing the money to the closing table. Like, that's the buyer. Like, I get that everyone has this convoluted idea in their mind that the seller's paying everything, but it's just, I had this conversation with one of my title reps years ago, and we were talking about, who is the one paying everything at closing. And, what she said to me is the transaction pays everybody, right? It's not.
That's a good way to put it, though, in a way.
And I was like, that makes sense. But it's really not that. When you give people options, it's much easier to get them to choose an option versus fight you on the value, right? So say I'm 3%, that's what I charge, or 2.7 or 2.5, whatever it is you want to charge. And you can talk about commissions. You can't say that we should all charge X commission. Right? That's the one thing I dread when I talk on some of these things. Like, don't talk about it. I'm like, you can talk about commission.
We can talk about it. We're not talking about specifically any one commission that you're supposed to charge. The point of it here is, one of the biggest things he just said is, when you're giving them an option, right? We can have the seller pay it. We can write it in concessions. We can, have you bring the money to the table. Then the buyer starts respecting your profession and sort of seeing you differently, and they have the option, and they know that it can be negotiated in contract. And so, which brings me to another point that I have, is what we focus on expands, right? You all heard that 1 million times. And I just really loved that you brought it up 2 weeks ago, and you said whatever you said in that call, because I think our mindset controls our outcome. We all get into the funk. We all get into this. Are we going to make it? Where's my next transaction coming from? But then we also get into the thing that once we have transactions flowing, we're like on top of the world, right? And everything's great. So once we get this into our heads that we are professionals and we can charge it this way, and this is how we present it, it just becomes natural. And it's not like a weird thing to do. And I don't know. I just really appreciated that perspective, because I had so many people calling me and asking me about it. So
it's and when it was just 0.5% or anything like that, like, I would explain to people, like, let's say a scenario comes up where listing broker is only paying out 2.5, right? Well, I'm 3. So your options are closing costs, pay it yourself, or, ask the seller to pay. But then when I talk to them about, if you paid it, let's say you're buying a $400,000 house, 0.5% of a $400,000 house is $2,000. That's like painting probably 2 or 3 rooms in your house, right? It's really not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. And I get a little flirtatious with it. I'm like, no, I'm worth it. And by that point they've gone through my presentation, so they probably see the value, right? But I mean, nowadays, one thing I've talked to a few other agents about that I actually like about the new rules is that listing agent's not going to go out there and tell me that we're paying out 2.5 or 2. Like they can tell me they are, but I've had a few, like I've called them. It's so funny. Like first thing out of their mouth is like 2.5. And I'm like, I appreciate that. I really don't care what you claim you're offering. I'm going to write in the purchase agreements and like, what my fee is. So, and I get that conversation on a few listings I have too, because they'll call me and they're like, hey, what are you, paying for a buyer broker? I'm like, we tell you to write it in the purchase agreement. Whatever you have on your buyer rep, I would tell you to write that in there.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. And the mud is like the water is like basically mud right now for a lot of states, especially here in Colorado. The way they redid our contract is rather confusing for a lot of people. And, you know, here at EXP, we are saying just write it in and let's negotiate the offer and in offer. So I totally agree with
It is
saying that.
It is a brave new world. It's strange. One of the offers I got yesterday, that agent never asked me what the commission was. She wrote in her purchase agreement. I respect her for it. She did it the right way. She just wrote it in there. You know, she didn't ask me like what we're paying. Maybe she knew that was the way EXP's handling things. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But she, you know, I just don't think it's a useful part of our time to be calling around and asking what the seller is willing to pay. I think it's like, you know, let me just write it into the purchase agreement. But what I like about it is in the past, you might look at a listing and might say they're paying 2, 2.5, 2.7, whatever. And I feel that some agents would take the listing at a reduced commission, but really what they would be doing is paying out the buyer broker less. And back when that was the way things were done, I wouldn't do it because I'm good at negotiating my fee. But I know that there are some agents out there that aren't skilled at negotiating it. So they might just steer their buyer away from buying that house. Right?
Totally.
But not to do it, right? And you know, people are like, well, you can't say that. You know, I'm like, yeah, well, I know people do it, just like I know that not everybody goes 55 on the highway, right? Like it's the way of the world. People aren't going to abide by the rules. And I feel like that's a disservice to my sellers to offer less than what I thought was common in our area at the time. Now, it doesn't matter what they do. Like I can just go out there and be like, this is what I charge. And the seller might, you know, balk at her to get angry about it. Last night I had a seller that's been kind of my biggest problem. You know, there's a 20% of the deals that are your 80% of your problems, right? This is my problem client, right? I get 1 to 2 problem clients a year. This is my second one this year. Happy to be done. I got the deal done, but it was so funny. You know, when I worked with them, I charged a 6.5% commission. Before this whole thing happened, I keep 3.5. I pay up 3. And the rules changed on Saturday. We finally get an offer yesterday. We do accept it ultimately. And it's not everything they want, right? But we've been on the market for a while and it's been kind of a difficult sale. It is what it is. The market's shifted, right? Things are down the last 8 weeks as far as buyer activity. And, you know, he's like, and the buyer agent wrote the 3% in there. And he was like, why am I paying the buyer's agent? I'm like, are you serious? Are we about to have this conversation right now? Because when we agreed to work together, we were paying that already. Like it's the same. He's like, well, they can pay their own buyer's agent. I'm like, you've been watching way too much news media, haven't you? I'm you think you know, but you don't know. Like you think you understand how these things are working right now, but that's only because you're reading it online and it's no basis in reality. And, you know, you can hem and haw about it, but in my market, I can guarantee you I'm probably one of the most on top of this whole thing of the agents out there. So don't try to act like you know better than I do. But
I love these conversations and I'm having them constantly. And you've heard me say it before. I say when I'm addressed with that exact statement, I say, but do you actually paying the commissions? Let's talk about perspective. We have a lender, we have a buyer, and we have a seller, right? Seller is stating how much equity they're going to give up. The buyer, if they're paying cash, is bringing all the money. So if the house is $700,000 house includes the closing fees, includes the seller's commissions, the buyer's commissions, all of it, right? if you bring $700,000 cash to the table, you just paid for everything, right? But the seller decided how much equity he was going to get. So I really love it when they start doing this to me, like in the middle of a listing presentation. And I say, okay, well, if you don't want to offer anything, then are we going to price your house at the market average of co-op 3% less or 3.5% less? Because now, if somebody has to come to the table with money, they're going to have to finance it in somehow, right? 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. We can either price it less or you can offer it. It's up to you, right? So, and then the lender will often say that they're the ones paying the commissions because they're giving you the money, right?
I wouldn't say the lenders would say that. I mean, they can. The buyer qualified for the loan. Still the buyer's money, right? But even if it's money they're getting on a loan. But,
I wish you were there for that debate the other week. It would have been fun.
Lender?
Yeah, I was a lender, yeah. Go ahead.
No, like the buyer is jumping through a bunch of hoops to get a loan. The money, it's the buyer who's like, they're still on the hook to pay that back. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird world, and it's there's just so much misinformation out there, and the public is especially the people who are buying and selling right now. They're very aware, or they're mindful of these things when they come. A lot of people don't know about it, right? But I've run into a few people even yesterday at the dog park, and this guy's like, how are these things happening with these rule changes? I'm like, okay, well, what have you heard? Because that's a really good way to really start it. Like, get them to share their experience and what they've heard, so that you can correct their or just be aware of how they're handling it, right? Like, because we're doing it every day. It's an easy conversation. But yesterday, this guy was like, well, what I know is that the sellers are no longer paying commissions. I'm like, actually, that's probably the opposite. So it's probably more likely that the sellers are going to be paying the commission now than it was in the past. And here's why. In the past, we as the broker would negotiate a commission, we would receive it, and we would co-op from the listing brokerage commission, right? Mm-hmm. Buyer's agent, right? That's the way that was. Now it's more likely that we're going to write it into the purchase agreement and has to state that it does come from the seller, or yes, the buyer can pay it, but ultimately the buyer's still paying it anyways in the purchase agreement because they're the only one bringing money to the closing table. Mm-hmm. And and then I just had the same conversation I just did about, the 3 different ways that the buyers are getting the money. But it was just interesting. It's like, sellers aren't paying commissions anymore. I'm like, actually, the opposite is true. The sellers are probably more likely to be paying the commissions now to the buyer's agent. In the past, it came from the listing brokerage. It was about decoupling of commissions is what it was about, not about the sellers not paying. And they just made it just got more convoluted and confusing, but it was kind of fun now to think that, we'll be referring to the past as when we used to pay out buyer brokers,
Right, 100%. And, yesterday we had our state meeting, and what I found just mind-blowing is how many different, and I don't know about in your state, but how many different companies are teaching the contracts for each individual state. So, and then how many attorneys are like real estate attorneys are weighing in and advising these companies when we have a state contract, right? So I just want to caution everyone to make sure that you're taking the class from your brokerage, not other brokerages, because they are, especially here in Colorado, they're doing some weird things and creating forms that aren't necessary, right? They've created this broker-to-broker agreement, which isn't even something that we're supposed to do in Colorado. What was the whole reason that lawsuit basically, well, it's one of the reasons that lawsuit existed. And so, yeah, make sure you know who you're taking that contracts class from and who you're getting your advice from. And it really needs to align with your company. So if you're with EXP, take it from EXP. Don't take it from HomeSmart or JW or whatever, because their rules in their company are a little bit different than yours. So anyways. I'm finding that that's happening a whole lot around here. So I don't know. I really appreciate you coming on here today. Coral, I don't know, are you still on here? Because you had a question more about just the conversation in general. I think, I don't know. She might be on a call.
I am. I'm here. Yeah, Alex covered everything I was interested in. I loved hearing how he approaches it, how he is bold in talking about it, and I'm looking forward to changing the way I talk about things.
Great. Oh, and then Alex, another thing, is there anything special in your buyer's presentation that maybe you do differently than other people's buyer's presentation? Do you have any secrets in there?
I'm going to be on Monday's call next week for I'm actually giving my buyer's presentation. So I talked to her about it and I'm going to do it myself. So I'm going to give mine. My actual buyer presentation is about 60 to 90 minutes long. So I'm probably going to like skip through a few things and really just kind of dive into it real quickly. But really what I do is I just, I break down, I do forward, but I don't do it like making a list, right? I just ask people, about themselves and I tell them, what are you doing?
He's being cute. He's being cute. So really important is to be on Krista's call next Monday. And then I saw that you're doing something with Wendy Goss on September 10th.
I don't think so. I'm not in that one. Unless I don't think I'm on that one.
Oh, I thought I saw your name on that big.
So I would probably have heard from Wendy.
I your name on one.
Oh, wow. Really all I do is I cover, getting to know someone. My buyer presentations are 2 sheets of blank paper in agency disclosure form and a buyer rep. And I usually like to meet people out at like restaurants, bars, coffee shops. And I have because I'm always out and about working at these different places because I don't have a formal office. So what I did when I switched to EXP is I decided I'm now going to work at different restaurants and bars every day, right? I'm going to set up my laptop, have my notebook, have a cup of coffee, have a non-alcoholic beer, whatever it is. And I'll work there and I'll like be friendly with the staff. So when I go and meet people at restaurants and bars, like the staff already knows me. So it's like super like a friendly atmosphere. The client can tell that I'm someone that, is known. We sit down, I pull out my laptop and even if they know me, I'm like, there's a few things I just like to go over with people right away. First off, here's my about page. This is who I am. Here are my awards. The only reason I show you these things is so you know that I am a credible real estate agent because everyone knows another real estate agent. You may not think that you know another real estate agent, but trust me, you definitely do. You just don't know.
They all know 10.
Right? You know some more real estate agents. Oh my God, would put my hand up. The reason why I mention this is people try to one up each other all the time. And, you have a friend who's a real estate agent, they're going to start chirping in your ear about how they would have done things differently, right? When they weren't in the room where it happened. So the reason why I share these things is so you know that I'm credible, I know my stuff, I have a feet in the street experience, I'm doing business every single day. Don't like that other agent might tell you things, but understand that I know what I'm doing, right? And then I show them my 229 5-star reviews and say, not only am I good on that side, I'm also good on the customer service side. And you're going to see some of that here today where I explain how these things work. My core values are education, communication, responsiveness. They show up in every way I go about my business. You're getting the education bit here. You'll understand that as we move along and things come up, I will be super responsive to you. Responsive does not mean immediate. I do set a lot of boundaries with my clients too. Like I'm gone 3 days a month. I'm working, but I'm not in the market 3 days a month. And typically what I'll do is I'll go like 2 months in a row and I'll be gone for a week or 2 weeks.
Right. I know. I love watching that. Go ahead.
Trying to slip on down to Nashville this weekend, actually. So I have a conversation with them just to like kind of set it forward so that who I am, that I'm a reputable real estate agent, right?
Right.
Then I prove it in my conversation with them, and I get to know a little bit about what they're looking for. I think that a lot of agents get really focused in on the needs analysis. In my experience, people don't necessarily know what they want right away, right? Like they have an idea of what they want, but they won't know until they get out into the market, right? And when I do talk about the buyer rep side of things, when I pull up the section, it says, buyer's agents who make a reasonable effort to help locate property. And I make it very clear to them, like, you have access to a lot of the same tools that I do when we're shopping for homes. Like, I'm not actually going to be out there looking on my phone, finding properties for you. I let you decide which houses you want to see. My job is to do research and get you into those properties quickly and get all the disclosures and explain things to you and give you an idea of what to expect on those things, handle negotiations, contracts, working you through the process. Yes, if I see a house that I think is going to work for you, I'm going to share it with you, right? But I'm not on my phone every day looking at properties. That is something like this is something you need to do, right? Buyer's agents, maybe back in the 90s, our job was to locate properties. That's not what we do anymore, right? Part of what we do. But but I do think that a lot of agents get really stuck on the needs analysis, and they're like, "Oh, I want to figure out exactly what you're looking for." Anyone can do that.
Right.
What people need is someone who's an expert and a guide in the process, who can explain things to them in easy ways so they can make good decisions, right? And that's what I see my job as. So after that, I get in and I pull out my blank sheet of paper. I turn it over. And I'm like, if it's a first-time home buyer, it's probably going to be 90 minutes. If it's someone who's bought before multiple houses, probably going to be somewhere around 45, 60. But I'll pull a blank sheet of paper. And I'm like, okay. So I tell people that there are about 6 different types of financing. Really, there's 7 if you include contract for deeds. I don't do contract for deeds. I just want to talk to you about it real quickly because you can go online and someone's going to mention contract for deed to you if you do any basic research, because I know you're going to be online Googling real estate. And yes, it's possible, but it's kind of like that Dumb and Dumber meme where it says, so you're telling me there's a chance, right? Because yes, you can offer a contract for deed, but the chances of the seller taking it are very slim. So I'm just really kind of nipping some of the bud, some of the misconceptions. And it's not necessarily whether they believe it or not. I want them to know that I know that other people believe those things, and I have done that in the past. And I'm just trying to, I want my buyer clients to know that I know my stuff, and I want them to be educated properly. So even if they've worked with another agent in the past, I have to be like, I just want to make sure there's no bad habits, right?
Right.
And I want to talk about these things so you don't think you can do this. Like, you can, but it's not really realistic. And here's why. Then I break down, there's cash financing, traditional conventional, insured conventional, FHA, USDA, rural development loans, and then VAs. And I just kind of explain each of those, and I tell them, I know that you only qualify for this one, or you do qualify for this one, or you're going to be qualifying for one of these two. And it's not so much important to me that you understand just what your type of financing is, which is very important. But I also want you to understand how your financing pairs up against the competition. Because even if it's lower right now, there's still a good chance that you are more likely to be competing with other buyers than you are competing with the seller.
In our market, we got a lot of the questions on assumptions. And so it's really good to talk about, okay, well, it's great that you can assume this loan at, 200,000, but the house is 500. Where's the other 300 going to come from? Right. And you have the deed one. We get the question about foreclosures. And then we have to go into the conversation of, yes, the likelihood of you getting a foreclosure is, 1 in 2,000.
Yeah, I haven't gone into that conversation in probably 3 years, really, but I used to get it all the time right away. Like, I want to buy a foreclosure. I'm like, okay, well, and anytime someone tells me they want to do something unique like that, I'm like, have you done that before? Yeah, because I want them to admit their ignorance. And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, just so you know, my experience in those things is typically it's going to require somewhere between 20, 25% down. Do you have that? No. Okay, yeah, it's because they're looking for a good deal, right? And they're like, oh, I can buy a house for super cheap. I'm like, you can if you have money.
And
risk.
and the fact of the matter is that part of the bailout was that they spelled all of the foreclosures, and we don't need to go down this road, but into large assets. So they're going to take 20 houses in one zip code, and they're going to sell it to one investor, and it's never going to be recorded on the county as to what that house sold for, so that the values on one street don't go down. And that is why you, Mr. Buyer, can't really buy them unless they're secondary or jumbo. And, if you want to go buy a jumbo foreclosure, I can do that. I can find those. But we're talking about a minimum of like 1.1. Do you have that?
That's the funny thing about it. It's just people, there's so much misinformation in real estate. And I feel like my main, in any buyer presentation, listing presentation, is to really just eliminate as much of the confusion and misassumptions that people have as possible. And when you do that and you give people different perspectives, they see you as an expert. And, you know, when I get to the point where I'm like, this is what I charge, you know, most people are just like, all right, and you sign. Like, and I think I'm fair. I think I'm fair commission. I don't think that I'm anything outrageous, right? I'm probably more expensive, but.
Do you tell stories? I'm a storyteller, right? Do you tell stories when you're talking about, you know, the things that you've done for clients or?
Like, an example would be like when I'm going over the types of financing that's available to someone, I would talk about like cash financing. So I'll talk about each one, and I'll say different banks offer different rates, different terms, different costs, everything. There's variations within all these things, but I want to give you the basics because I want you to understand what you qualify for and how you're going to be competing with some of these other buyers out in the market. So like an example would be like, and one of the first stories I talk about is, you know, how quickly do we close on properties? And like we typically with a cash deal, it's about 14 days because we're still going to likely have title work done. And we're going to need to make sure that everything works out that way. Quickest I've ever closed a cash deal was 8 days. And the only reason we were able to do that is because the seller's title work was already completed. And we just had to transfer everything into our buyer's title, right? So I drop little stories in there about what other clients and things have gone through. Another one would be like, you know, going on showings. And like I had a client, you know, a few weeks ago, and this happens regularly, who's just about to start telling me everything that they want to offer on this property. I'm like, there's a Ring doorbell right there. Like, let's be careful about what we say at the property, you know. Or one time years and years ago in 2017, I had a client who had a friend who was an inspector. That friend came to the inspection, walked around with like a little moisture gun and said it looked good. I was like, that is not an inspection. Well, like just like sharing different things that happen in the transaction, talking about like offers and negotiations, and like we can make a really good solid offer, but understand that there's an emotional side to this too, and we don't know the personalities of the people on the other side of the transaction, and people aren't always easygoing and understanding. Like some people are really headstrong and like they think their house is worth this and that's what it is, and we can't really, like, you might love that house, but we can't get them to come down on the price. You know, I'm sorry, you know. And I am worried with the new buyer broker rules, like running into a few sellers that are literally like, I'm not paying the buyer's agent at all. I'm like, well, my agreement, like people are like, you need to negotiate your fee. I'm like, I need to negotiate my fee with my buyer. Mm-hmm. Right? But I don't want to turn around and have to renegotiate my fee with someone else's client. Right, like that is what I don't like. Right. But whatever, I make it clear to my buyers, like, this is what I charge and this is fair, and go that way. But no, I use a lot of stories.
Yeah, well, some of the big key points that I got from you is that you do meet with your buyers in the very beginning, and you have long conversation, and you know, you present your value and you set the expectations. Like, I try not to work past 7 p.m. All my amendments go out by 4:30 so that we are not working past 7. Just respect for the boundaries, and that you do tell them that you're going out of town. I just love this side and this perspective. I think it's valuable to everybody on this call, and I can't wait to see you on Krista's call on Monday. I will definitely be there. I'm super excited to see that. And I'm sorry, I thought you were on Wendy's thing, but I swear I saw your name. Anyway.
Maybe she put me on there and didn't tell me. I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised because you're pretty awesome. So, right. Mad respect. And does anybody have any questions for Alex before he goes? Jump in. Can't see you.
No questions, but I lost one transaction, like, 2 days back I did it, and the listing agent is my friend also, and he told I lost it because buyer agent didn't ask any commission, any contribution from the sellers.
So, so just so I'm clear, like the buyer, he's a listing agent and he got an offer from a buyer's agent and they didn't ask for any commission. Yeah. So is that buyer's agent being paid by the buyer?
No.
So that buyer's agent's not getting.
So that buyer's agent doesn't have errors and omissions.
Yeah.
Coverage.
That's not good.
That's not good.
Very sad. Yeah. I think that thing is happening. might happen now.
It's going to continue to happen because there's plenty of agents out there that are not keeping up with the rules. They don't understand the new contracts, and this is going to continue to happen until they fall out of the business, honestly. And I think it's going to be a very short-lived thing. I think we will have changes that come out of this for the better. But yeah, it's going to weed through some people, and I'm sorry that your clients lost it, but just understand that if you write a contract and you are not compensated in any way, shape, form, or fashion, you do not have errors and omissions insurance, if anything.
Yeah. As you said, it's like a mud water now. It takes time. Yeah. It takes time. Yeah. That's fine. We will survive,
Right.
I think that a mistake is what happens. I don't think they meant to do that.
Well, and the likelihood of that transaction holding together is pretty low. So I would probably put in a backup offer on that immediately, because, an agent that can't figure out how he's getting paid probably doesn't know how to negotiate a deal.
Got it.
The agent on the other side of the transaction always matters.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do, it has something to do with it, but not really anything to do with it. It's just something I learned yesterday after 25 years in the business. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a company called Xiaomi, right? So there was a case here in Colorado where an agent, a listing agent, or not a listing agent, a buyer's agent hired a Xiaomi agent to go and show their buyer. And so they had an agency, the buyer's agent had an agency with this buyer, hired a Xiaomi agent to go and show them like 5 or 6 houses. And 2 complaints came in that something was stolen out of the house.
Ooh.
Okay. And after all of it's said and done, they found that the Xiaomi agent, did not have errors and omissions insurance for the people that she was showing because she did not have agency. And then they additionally said this applies to people who are allowing other agents to hold their houses open as well. So just a little top, I try to put a tip in every day. Now, when we're taking listing agreements or buyer's agreements, we have to, if you have a Xiaomi agent, you need to add them into your buyer's agency. I'm specifically working with this Xiaomi agent, or I'm specifically working with this agent that will be part of this, whatever. And then if you're doing open houses, try to stay within the brokerage. And then if you're going to do open houses and let someone else do it, mention it in your listing agreement so that you can have some sort of coverage if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
We got that. We had a state attorney for Minnesota Association of Realtors came down and did a class for like 200 of us agents that showed up. And I'm like front row, like, hey, I have things I want to talk about. And one thing that I forgot to ask him that has been kind of on my mind lately is, let's say I'm representing buyer and it's, single buyer or 2 buyers or whatever. And I take them to a property and then mom and dad shows up. Do I need an agency agreement with mom and dad before they can come into the house? And maybe I don't, but let's say later on, mom and dad say, hey, we're going to be co-signing later. And now at that point, I would definitely get a buyer rep with them, right? But I already showed them a house. Am I in trouble? And if I'm not in trouble, is someone going to get in trouble with that down the road? Being claimed that you showed a house to these people and they're helping with the financing in some way, whether it's a co-signing or a...
Well, what if mom and dad stole something?
Well, I don't know that. I don't know about all that. I'm more worried about like them being like, you showed that buyer a house and you didn't have a buyer rep. And I'm like, well, they weren't actually my buyer at the time. They just showed up.
Mm-hmm.
The daughter was like, hey, my mom and dad's coming, or my sister's coming, and they show up to the house, and then all of a sudden they're somehow involved in the transaction. Later on, did I break the rule? Right?
Yeah.
I see someone say, or you don't get paid. I'm not so worried about that as I am getting a $2,500 fine to show someone a house that is under a buyer run. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and then I see what you're saying, right? Because this new NAR rule, we actually have a rule here in Colorado that you cannot force a buyer to sign an agency before you show them a property.
Yes.
You can't. I mean, you can't say that it's law because it isn't in the state of Colorado. You can say it's my practice to not show a house without some sort of compensation agreement, but you can't say the law is because it isn't in the state of Colorado.
rule. So,
Yeah. So that would be fine for us, but not for you. And I just love that, I've been in business for 25 years and I still feel like I'm learning every day. And I love this KMO. I love this Agent Power Huddle. I love EXP because we can jump on calls with people who do things better than us and we can all benefit. And I really appreciate your time today, Alex. I can't wait till Monday. And yeah.
Confident, very confident. Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'll see you Monday.
yeah. Everyone have a
Right.
great
You have a great day, guys.
I have one question. I know I understood the previous conversation. I have a listing. If some buyer calls, I'm not supposed to show.
You had to have a agreement with them, or it might. So when the state attorney was at our conference, what he said is you can host open houses, right? And you don't need anything, right? He was like, so what's to stop me from saying I have an open house at what time do you want to go see the house? 5:30? Okay, I'm going to do an open house at 5:30. Put an open house sign in the front yard. Boom, open house, right? He's like, I just, found a way around this. And I'm like, oof, I probably wouldn't do that. But, I would tell them, like, you have to understand who's your agent. You should have an agent. I actually have a conversation with my sellers that I would prefer not to represent the buyer because I don't like dual agency. I'd rather represent one side in any transaction, not because anything shady is going to happen, but because people have a tendency to create stories in their minds about who I'm looking out for in a transaction. And, if someone's asking for $700 water heater to be replaced, all of a sudden I go to the seller and I tell them that, and they're like, well, you're looking out for the buyer. I'm like, no, I'm telling you what the buyer is requesting. And, here's what you can expect around those things. They're like, well, you're encouraging me to take it. I'm like, I'm trying to hold the deal together. I don't know. You tell me what you want to do. But people have a tendency to get angry during dual agency the night. So I try to avoid it. I tell them to work with another agent. I tell them I can refer you to an agent. They're like, you're not going to show me in the house. I'm like, well, I have a fee that I charge to represent people. And honestly, I think it's in your interest to have your own agent. Now, this might change. This whole thing is evolving. I might start doing open houses again, right? And I don't believe in open houses.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't like open houses. I feel like we have enough digital products out there that people don't really need the open house, number one. But back to you, Suma, I think that I don't always show it, right? I ask them if they have an agent. I ask them how they're going to do the contracts, right? And I do charge and I do show them. I have that discussion in the listing appointment that if a buyer comes to me, this is what is going to be charged. Also, if I take it with big if, I very rarely take a variable commission, but if I do, I always state it in the MLS that the commission is variable. And if we have multiple offers, I always tell the other agent what my variable commission is so that it's fair playing field, right? So one, I'm going to get paid from the buyer. But yes, I would agree that I would really like to have another agent on the other side so that I feel like I'm fully the seller's agent. We have transaction brokers here, not dual agents, and we just ship to neutral parties. And I'm really careful when I am in those kind of deals. But yes, you should show it, but make sure that you're not just showing it for an attorney, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Correct. That's what I got a call. Like he was like a little bit argument. He told, I know all the rules and regulation. How are you representing the seller? You are there to sell the house. I am the buyer. You give me the disclosure and I want to buy the house.
Okay.
Then
Here's my, I don't know what you have in your state because I'm not a California agent. I'm a Colorado agent, but here I have a broker disclosure to seller.
Yeah.
Right. Or broker disclosure to buyer. Sorry.
Yeah.
And it would state, that right now I'm a seller's agent.
Yeah.
If I'm going to show it, if you're not going to use me, then if you do use me, we're going to shift to transaction broker, and this is how much I'm going to get paid. I've already agreed to this with the seller. Or if you were going to represent yourself, then you're going to pay me either an open door fee or you can go find another agent to do it. Really, that's my rule. But
that's what I told you. I don't know whether you are like, yeah, I
really worry about those buyers that are like, well, I'll do it myself, and I'll get that because it's like I understand that you think my job is easy.
Yeah.
What I do is not easy. Like what are you going to do when a problem comes up or the lender is asking you for something that you don't know how to handle? Like I have the knowledge, the resources, and the teamwork capabilities to find a solution to that. But even if you bought or sold 6 properties before in your life, you might think you understand everything that goes into this. But when a problem comes up, it makes me worried. And I would even caution my seller, if a buyer came in and wanted to, essentially represent themselves or not have an agent, I would be really nervous about that because like they could mess up on their side.
That's what I told. Yeah.
It's a big risk. Like your deal might fall apart because this person doesn't have the full knowledge. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of agents.
Let's talk about, I know we got to probably wrap it up here, but I mean, think about the liability too. Even if you're a seller's agent and you've disclosed it to the buyer that you're a seller's agent and they're trying to handle their contract themselves. Well, Colorado, we have a 24-page contract. So, if the buyer says that to me, I'm like, okay, can you tell me the difference between a general warranty and a special warranty deed? Can you tell me what, the HOA docs deadlines are, what a status letter is, what happens if assessment comes in after the fact? What are you going to do? If you can answer me those questions, then fine, sir, go ahead and write it yourself. However, if you don't know these questions, like right off the top of the head, please hire someone. Because I don't even want to represent, I don't even want to be part of the transaction if we have a buyer on the other side that could date, 6 months from now that we were unfair in some way.
Correct. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Anyway, I think that I was going down a rabbit hole, so,
You have to guide the public, that's all. Everybody has to guide the public.
I'll say one last thing. All right. So one thing that makes me like a little frustrated with the way a lot of these things are handled, or people will like you should represent me and I'll reduce the fee and you represent both sides and you'll get paid double or almost double. And I'm like, you think you're doing me a favor. And I get that. Like you think that you're doing me a favor, letting me represent you and making additional money. But I want you to understand that to me, money is important. Right. But I actually love what I do. I'm very service oriented and I care about my clients. You want me to represent you as the buyer as well on this dual agency thing and do it at a lower commission. So you get your offer accepted and you think you're doing me a favor, but what you're doing is you're causing a lot more stress on me because now I represent both sides. I have to look out for both of you. If one of you becomes non-cooperative, now I'm stuck in the middle of that whole thing. I would much rather just take my 3% or 3.5 or whatever.
Yeah.
And you have your own agent over here, but you think you're doing me a favor. And I've told people this, like I had a seller who, they had a buyer for their house. I'd already signed a listing agreement with them. And they were like, all right, yeah, you can represent, they're like, we'll do it at 2% with you on this sale. And then you can list my house for sale. The buyer said, and I'm like, and I said exactly those words. I said, you think you're doing me a favor. You are not doing me a favor. This is going to make it much more difficult for everybody involved. Right. Like, and and that seller became a problem, right? Because, you know, and it became exactly what I expected it would be, because they didn't find me the typical way that a client does. So like I have those people a lot of the times like, you're going to get paid more. I'm like, if it's not,
Really?
yeah, that too. Like it's a lot of those situations. I'm not, but like it's the conversation where it's like you think you're doing me a favor, but what you're doing is you're making it more difficult.
Right. And there's a stat somewhere that says that transaction brokerage or dual agency or whatever, those kind of transactions end up in front of mediation or arbitration at like, I don't know. Yeah. Don't quote me, like 27% of them, anything that goes to mediation or arbitration is that. And and all I'm going to say, last word, so you don't kill me, is read your E&O, right? Because I think the last time I read the E&O was about a year ago, and it said, you know, it's $2,500 off the bat and 1%, right? So if you're charging only 1% on the buy side, you get paid anyway if it goes to arbitration mediation, right? So keep up with that.
It's not. I'm so like frustrated with a lot of the misinformation out there, and
Yeah.
It's really hard when someone, again, they think that they're doing you a favor, and it's like you're not. Like I know in your mind you think you are, because you think that us realtors are just about money, but I have enough money and I have enough clients, so like I don't necessarily need more money, right? What I need is happy clients, and you put us in a situation where I may not have a happy client. And I don't like that.
Right.
I'd rather not have the money.
I just love this mentality, and I'm just so happy that you took the time to be on the show today. You talked to all these people. We went a little bit overboard, a lot overboard on time. Appreciate the Power Huddle. Appreciate all of you being here. I appreciate the questions. And I can't wait to see you Monday, Alex, on the call. All right.
Great weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
If you'd like more information or to get connected to the Agent Power Huddle, join our free Facebook group. This call was designed for the agents in our EXP organization, but open to any agent from any brokerage. If you're a guest and you're interested in learning more about EXP or our specific resources within the Agent Collective, reach out to the person who invited you to this call to get more info. Produced by the Agent Collective Media Network.